What's up, everybody? Zach here from Forward Strength with this isn't a product. It's not something I want to sell you. This is basically just information that I really think everybody should have, especially right now it's kind of winter, it's gray, in Michigan it's going to be gray for probably another 4 months, and a lot of folks suffer from what they call seasonal affective disorder, or the sensation of having sort of depressed mood and having general attitude and mood problems because we're sort of in these like down months. So this is a big problem that I think a lot of folks can relate to. Is just the feeling of like not quite feeling yourself. And it's not, yearly sequestered. I think a lot of people feel this all year round. It's just easier to hide in the summer because we can all like pretend to do fun things. But changing your mood with fitness and putting diet and exercise to change your attitude long term is, I think, something that everyone should know generally how to do, and shouldn't necessarily be hidden behind a paywall where you have to, pay a personal trainer a bunch of money to know how to do this, or even subscribe to like group programs like mine. Like I think this is something everyone should know how to do. So I just wanted to take you through how I think about sort of using fitness to change your mood, to just give you some information. So let's see what happens. So is this for you? Because not everything that everybody says is for everyone, right? There's little nuggets of truth that everyone is going to pick out of every information, YouTube video or webinar or whatever, podcast or book, I don't know. So is this for you? Are you human? We have to check that box, right? Because if this is all about human physiology and human anatomy and how humans function, and if that's a thing that you either check out of when people are talking about like, the human body does this, or, this particular food is a superfood, and you're just like, I'm gone, I don't care. That is an attitude that I would encourage you to reconsider, because the body that you're living in, it's, for now, it's the only one that you have. And so making it work well for you is something that I think folks need to embrace a little bit more. I think a lot of folks also think that, they think this, you're not wrong. Change is hard and uncomfortable. It is by nature. It has to be hard and it has to be uncomfortable because your body really likes staying exactly the way that it is, right? It works really hard to stay exactly the way that it is. So change of any kind, to get it to accept a new normal, is going to be uncomfortable. It's just about deciding that it's worth it and choosing to believe that it's possible. And that's hard. I'm 100% with you. That's hard. So also, do you feel like you're in a funk but don't know how to get out of it? I think if you're feeling amazing and your workouts are going great and you look and feel exactly the way that you want to, that's great. This video is probably not for you. I'd still encourage you to watch it just because it's good information, I think. But if that's not you, then the recommendations I'm going to make, honestly, you're probably already doing them whether you know it or not. Do you have an energy roller coaster that feels like it's getting worse? For most folks, that means like, usually it's just a crash and not necessarily an upswing. But the roller coaster effect of, that afternoon fall of, I just suddenly have no energy. I don't feel good. I don't feel like I'm really focused and here and present. Some folks even, they'll get like a little spike in the morning and then realize it's because they had 4 cups of coffee, and then there's a big crash and that's kind of it for the day. But if you feel like, especially if it's getting worse as you get older, this kind of relates back to being human. Of a lot of folks say, oh, it's just part of getting older and I don't have a choice about it. Well, that's also not true. Yes, getting older will make it harder to make the changes that we're talking about, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth the endeavor, and it doesn't mean that it's impossible. That just means that it won't be as easy as it was maybe when you were 20, but literally nothing is as easy to do physically as it was when you were 20. So I don't think that's an argument that we can sort of take apart. And then lastly, are you tired of not feeling good and feel ready to make a change? I think this is important because if you aren't ready to do something about these feelings that you're having, then the rest of this information is just academic, which is great. And I don't think that means you shouldn't have that information, but being ready to make a change and being open to embracing new things is an important part of getting to an eventual end goal. Again, if you're just taking in this information and you don't do anything about it, then you can't really be mad in 6 months when nothing has changed or things have gotten worse because you didn't do anything about it. But that, even if that's the case, if you take this in and it sort of simmers and eventually pops back up in your brain in a few weeks, months, whatever, that's great, because now you can start from wherever you're at. I think we all feel the sudden pressure and the sudden like intimidation of you have to do a big life change right now. And that's not necessarily true, right? Let it simmer, let it soak. That's okay. So here's the science. Here's what we're talking about. So there's a connection between two kinds of physical ability and depression and anxiety, or really the sort of the mood swings that I think most normal people have. And I'm not talking about like clinical depression and anxiety where your brain doesn't function the way that sort of a generalized normal brain ought to. If you're currently taking medication for depression and anxiety, then what I'm not saying is that this is going to sort of get you off those meds by itself and you can just dump them. I definitely am not advocating for that. But what I am saying is that for most normal people who have some depression symptoms and some anxiety symptoms, depending on sort of how you're feeling on that day, I think it's kind of a spectrum and we all have some of these symptoms now and again, then that's a conversation that we can have of talking about changing lifestyle factors in order to mitigate some of those symptoms and in fact help you feel a lot better. Again, this is not a clinical or a medical fix. I'm not trying to purport myself as better than what your doctor knows, but this is absolutely for normal folks who feel like they just aren't feeling good and want to feel better. So the two physical abilities we're talking about are the ability to produce lactate and the ability to process lactate. Now, you probably heard that word before, lactate, lactic acid, not to be confused with lactose in milk, and that's totally different. Here's the thing, though. What you've probably heard about lactate and lactic acid is probably not true. Unfortunately, some studies are more popular than others and are thrown around a lot more, and so they enter the public consciousness, but they're not necessarily the truth. In this case, lactate or lactic acid is not at all related to soreness. It isn't a waste product of exercise. It's a common misconception just because, again, it's entered the public consciousness because of some popular studies, not scientific consensus. And this is all very Googleable stuff, and I do encourage you to go check this out for yourself, because you don't just take my word for it. Just taking someone's word for it when you hear it once is kind of the problem that leads to this sort of thing, where folks hear something and suddenly that's just true, and now we just believe it forever. So please double check all this stuff. I encourage you to do that. So what is lactate actually? We talked about what it isn't, but what is it actually? So lactate is a chemical compound in your body. 2 lactates equal 1 glucose, so like sugar, right? Blood sugar levels. There's more nuance, but for simplicity's sake, let's just call it sugar. And if your eyes are already glazing over because you're like, I hated chemistry, I hated bio, just tell me what to do. We'll get to action steps in a minute, but understanding sort of what we're talking about is a key component to making great decisions later on. And you don't just need someone to always tell you what to do. So lactate, again, 2 lactates equal 1 glucose, and that's how the body shuttles around quick energy. Lactate works like an energy source and a hormone, and these are 2 different things, right? An energy source being how do you have energy to do stuff, and then a hormone being a signaling agent that tells your body what to do, right? So you need to be able to do stuff, and you need to tell your body what to do. Being able to do a bicep curl doesn't mean anything if you don't have sort of the hormones and the nervous system to tell your body, hey, do a bicep curl, right? We need to have that connection. So hormone, it signals your heart and your brain to produce other hormones. So one thing that lactate does is it helps teach your body to flip the switch between fight or flight and rest and digest. This is known as your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous systems. It's how your body sort of tells itself, do I need to be excited about this or do I need to be relaxed, right? So when you're, you have gone camping and suddenly a grizzly bear is in your camp and you need to get big and scare it off, sympathetic, right? Fight or flight. And when you're lying in bed trying to go to sleep and you start feeling drowsy and then all of a sudden you wake up the next day, right? That drowsy feeling, parasympathetic or rest and digest. These are catchy names, but they're pretty descriptive of, I think, the sort of the feeling that you'll have for each of these nervous systems. Fight or flight is a very specific set of feelings of being really amped up. And rest and digest, I think this one's interesting because rest, I think a lot of people can sort of apply their brains to, but digest is a tough one. Most folks, I think, don't relate the act of digesting food to how they're feeling emotionally and how their energy is throughout the day. So if you ever think about what's the turkey, the tryptophan nap or whatever, after you eat a bunch of turkey and then you fall asleep. Well, it's not the turkey and it's not the tryptophan. It's the fact that you just ate a bunch of food and your body says, the only thing I can handle right now is processing everything that you just put in me. I can't also handle using my brain and running around and thinking really intensely about stuff, right? Your body would prefer to just digest. And what goes with digest is rest, so you take that nap. So that's what lactate is. It's an energy source and it's a hormone, and we need to think about it as doing both of those things. Okay, so get to the good stuff. Yeah, I've been talking a whole lot about sort of some general chemicals, but let's talk about how do we change your mood? Because that's why we're here. So you want to be able to produce more lactate. What does that mean? We need to go hard in a workout twice a week, right? We need your body to be able to produce this energy source and hormone. We need to be able to tell your body, hey, get amped up. We need to be sort of reach this peak of awareness, peak of arousal level where you're really amped up. We need to go hard in workouts twice a week. Twice a week is a very general number, but it's where most folks find is a happy medium between not enough stimulus to do anything, right? If you just did it once a week or 0 times a week, your body isn't getting enough of that stimulus. You're not stimulating that sympathetic nervous system enough to see a long-term change. It's just uncomfortable and nothing happens, right? So twice a week is good. 3 times a week, most folks, for most general folks, especially untrained people who haven't been in the gym for a really long time doing this stuff, 3 times a week is too much to recover from and you're just tired all the time. So 2 is sort of the happy medium. But again, do your own research, try this stuff on your own and see sort of what a good balance for you is. But 2 is very most commonly a pretty good one. The other one is to eat fewer carbs. So if your body is always taking in glucose, taking in sugars and carbohydrates constantly from your diet, pretty much any time we take in something from the outside that your body ought to be producing on its own, your body just says, well, I'm not going to waste any energy doing that if I'm just going to get it from the outside anyway. So that's a problem with folks who take, like, melatonin's a good example. If you always are taking melatonin in order to go to sleep, your body produces less melatonin on its own, and you have a harder time falling asleep without the pill. Testosterone's another good one. You think about, like, steroid use, that's a totally different conversation, but one of the problems with steroid use is that your body stops producing its own testosterone, and so when you take away steroids, there's no testosterone, and that's bad. So eat fewer carbs. I'm not saying 0 carbs. We'll get to that in a second. But eat fewer carbs. This is not an advocation for the ketogenic diet or Atkins or something like that, right? This is just eat fewer than you're currently eating because I'm willing to bet that you're eating too many as it is. And we'll get to timing and such here in a second. So that's produce more lactate. Now we need to process that lactate better. So just having lactate isn't necessarily going to help because too much lactate, again, coming from like eating lots of carbs, is a trigger for anxiety. And that's one of the things that we're trying to avoid, right? You're amping yourself up too much with nothing to do about it, right? There's no exercise to sort of use that lactate. There's no way to process that stuff. So, we need to eat fewer carbs, and then we need to process that lactate better. So how do you do that? Go slow in a workout twice a week. What we need is to be better able to take in and use oxygen, because oxygen is one of the ways that the chemical reaction of processing lactate happens. So if you can take in more oxygen and get rid of more carbon dioxide by breathing better, like cardio, right? This is sort of traditional cardio. That is going to help you process that lactate better. So you're not you don't have too much lactate and you have that that anxiety symptom. So we need to produce more lactate to avoid depression symptoms, and we need to process lactate better to reduce anxiety symptoms. Yep, there we go. Also, you want to eat more healthy fats to go with that, because again, fats oxidize. That's the process that we break fats down. That's how you get energy. Oxidizing that fat, we need oxygen and we need fat, and these things go together. And so you eat more fats to fuel that process. And that's the meat and potatoes, right? That's what you want to be able to do. You need to produce more lactate, and you need to process that lactate better. We can't just take away lactate and just produce 0 lactate. So say you're a person who's struggling with anxiety symptoms. If we just didn't eat carbs but also didn't do any intense exercise, your body is not going to respond just by reducing the anxiety symptoms. You're probably going to drop way off with your lactate, and then you enter that depression stage. And that's where a lot of folks are. Especially, again, we talk about this time of year because you can't go outside as much. You can't walk around as much. So we need to be able to produce lactate and process that lactate in a proper balance so that we're not accidentally swinging too far in the spectrum. The pendulum isn't swinging too far in either direction. Okay, action steps, right? So that was sort of conceptual. Now let's talk about how to make this happen. So you start by only eating carbs before working out. So again, we didn't say no carbs, but we said let's use them appropriately. So there will be an adjustment period because we're all used to taking in just a little bit here and there, or maybe bigger quantities at certain meals. Like if you're a toast for breakfast kind of person, this is going to be an adjustment period. It's going to be harder. Pay attention to your mood and see how it changes when you do have carbs outside of working out. So say you are really, really good for 2 weeks and you feel the changes. Hey, I do feel better and I do feel like my workouts are a little bit better. And then you go out for dinner and drinks with friends and have a bunch of fries because you don't want to be a weirdo and like not eat food when you're hanging out with your friends. That's fine. That's totally cool. I don't advocate for being that weirdo who brings like a food scale to the restaurant. Don't do that. Don't be weird. But if you're out and you do have those carbs, pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to what happens when you have that. A lot of folks find that they suddenly have these anxiety symptoms where they're like, oh, these carbs are really amping me up. Because again, you're not working out. You're not burning that stuff. You're not using that fuel. And so it's just sitting around and your body's processing it anyway. So what do you do with that? You just create that anxiety symptom. So eat carbs only before working out. There will be an adjustment period. Trust that it's worth it. Again, give this a fair shot, run a fair experiment, and do it for more than a couple of days, right? 1 or 2 days and then crashing and falling off. It's not going to get you any usable data, any results. It's just going to be another failed experiment. And if you're anything like me, we've been through enough of those. And that we've run the experiment on failed experiments. Nothing happens and we just feel bad. So give it a fair shake. Then after you've done that, after you feel like you have a pretty good handle on only eating carbs before working out, then add a longer walk once a week, at least 30 minutes, preferably outside, right? If we can get more fresh air, we can get more of that sunlight. Those are other useful things that is sort of beyond the scope of this particular video, but we can talk about that too. Once a week, at least 30 minutes, preferably outside. Now, a second ago, I said 2 times a week. Now I'm saying once a week. What I'm saying now is we're building a habit. We're building towards 2 times a week. But a lot of folks find that the time commitment is sort of intimidating. So you can make 30 minutes once a week. If that means watching 1 fewer TV shows, that has to be worth it. You have to prioritize making this health change over, whatever 30-minute show you could be watching. And that's a choice that you have to make. That's one that nobody else can make for you, especially on a daily or weekly level. You have to prioritize this in order to make a real change. And that's the big message of any behavior change that anybody's going to tell you to do, is that you are the one that's responsible for this. You have to choose to prioritize this over whatever you could be doing, even if it doesn't feel as fun. But it's worth it because you'll feel better. And so I encourage you to do it. So after 2 weeks of adding 1 longer walk, again, 30 minutes, preferably outside, per week, after 2 weeks, add another one. Increase to 2 times a week, still 30 minutes. Again, if you're already in the habit of just not watching TV for 30 minutes and going for a walk outside, just doing that 1 more time a week is not that disruptive. It's about choosing to do it in the first place, but it's also about ramping yourself up, making that progress that's going to be rewarding and help you feel better. Just jumping in and saying, 2 times a week isn't enough. I can do 5 times. I can do 7 times. I can do 8 times. And it's like, that math doesn't really work out. Doing too much too soon is a great way to burn yourself out. So just add once a week. And then after 2 weeks, add another one a week, so you're at 2. Then after you've done that, you'll probably already start to feel better by pulling back some of those carbs and adding some of that sort of low intensity, just walk activity. That's going to already feel a little bit better. But now we can talk about adding a higher intensity workout once a week. So the idea here is to work to pretty much exhaustion, to work sort of to your body's capability, not to your mood's allowance. And the difference there is you can sort of go and then decide, I don't really want to do this anymore. Or like, it's a little uncomfortable and I'm going to stop. There's a big difference between that and pushing through that and going until you literally cannot do anymore. And what we need is to get to the cannot do anymore side, because that's how we start, again, producing and burning that lactate. That's that really helpful zone versus, I don't wanna is like not enough to really accomplish anything. So you wanna add 1 of those a week. So right by this point in the progression, we're at 2 low intensity workouts and 1 high intensity workout. We wanna do things that you can do without thinking to exhaustion. We need things that you can do well and safely without thinking. So just doing a bunch of deadlifts because you saw a deadlift video until you literally can't do any more is probably not going to be helpful, because that's probably a recipe for disaster, a recipe for injury. I do not encourage that unless you've been training for a really long time and are absolutely bulletproof with your technique, which I would argue that very few people are, even like world champions. And honestly, also, if you're that person, you're probably not watching this video. So I don't think that heavy weights are going to be a good idea for this. But things like sprints and sled pushes and mountain climbers and burpees and things that you can do with your body that have a general sort of low skill level, those are great things to do that are high intensity. Or even like take a class, take like a spin class. I think that's great, right? Go to a drop in at a CrossFit gym, something like that. Do something that's really high intensity twice a week. Excuse me, we're starting with once a week, just the same progression as we did before. And then after 2 weeks, increase to 2 times a week. We're going to bump that up. So now we're at 2 low intensity workouts and 2 high intensity workouts. And that's how we got to our, there we go. That's how we got to our recommendation from before. There you go. So that's really, this is what I recommend you do. And if you need to like write this down or pause and write it down or type it out or take a screenshot, I think that's a good idea. This is what I think you should be doing. Start by only eating carbs before working out. That's the first thing we're going to do. There will be an adjustment period. It will be hard, but it's worth it. Pay attention to your mood. See what happens. Then add a longer walk once a week for 30 minutes, preferably outside, and then add a second one. So now we're at sort of 2 times a week, and then add 1 high-intensity workout, and then add another high-intensity workout, and now that's where you are. I think in there, somewhere along that journey, you're going to find things that you love to do, and you're going to find things that feel really good, and you're going to find things that are hard and you're bad at, and you can just, and it's worth it to practice and get better at those things, because learning is another way that your brain sort of makes itself happy. Your brain is a learning machine. It likes to learn. So this is my recommendation. I really think it's something that everyone should know and everyone should be able to do. Give it a try. It costs you nothing to try. If you're having trouble, right, we do have programs that are designed to help you with this. So we have Forward Nourish's 4-week habit builder program, so we can learn how to do the nutrition side of this. And if you have no idea what to do for your workouts, you can try the online group training program for Forward Strength. And if you have any questions, please send them in, right? You can comment on Facebook, YouTube, or email athlete.forward@gmail.com. So again, this is information that I think everybody should have. This should not be trapped behind seeming like a professional because you're wearing a polo, even though you paid $50 online in a weekend to get your certification. Like, I don't think people should pretend to be experts and hide this information from normal people. I think we should all know how to do this stuff. It's like, we should all know some, basic survival stuff, or how to change a tire, stuff like that, because you never know when you're going to need it, and no one's going to be there to help you. So that's Forward Strength. This is how to change your mood through fitness, diet, and exercise to sort of help get you through the blues and suppress those anxiety and depression symptoms. So again, send questions. Let us know what you think. Thanks a lot.